Namaste and welcome to part 8 of How to Awaken Your Mind. Thank you so much for joining me in this session. So in this session we're going to be looking at our actions, how we need to make sure that our actions of body, speech and mind are wise and skillful actions. So in the last part 7 we looked at understanding the way the world really works. So now we need to look at our actions within that world that we live in. Remember we don't live in a bubble, so whatever you do will affect other people, and of course what they do will affect you. This is something that we need to keep in our minds all the time, because if we don't, then we can sometimes just feel that it's all about us, me. I mean, it's so easy for us to get trapped in that selfish way of thinking. So if we keep it in mind that whatever actions I'm going to be doing now will affect somebody else along the line, and what they're doing now will affect me. It's a great way of just keep reminding ourselves that we're all interconnected and we don't live in a vacuum or live in a bubble. So we're going to be looking at actions of body, speech and mind. So of course the body and speech, you'll probably say, okay, actions, but actions of mind? Well, wait and then I'll get to that a bit later on. So what are wise and skillful actions? We have to make sure that at all times our actions are not causing harm to anybody. And that means not causing harm to ourselves and not causing harm to other people. If we can keep that in the front of our mind as well, that to ensure that, this action that I'm about to do, is it wise? Is it skillful? So remember, I'm not saying here, I know sometimes when we look at the Eightfold Path, we say things like right action or correct action, but I don't think we should be looking at actions as right or correct, because that means there's wrong and there's incorrect, and there's such grey areas between things. So maybe you set out and you had really good intentions, but your actions turned out to actually harm somebody, but your intention was to help. So what we're talking about here is skillful and wise actions, intentional actions, actions you intended to do. So I know that in some religions like Hinduism, that they say that whatever you do, you will have karma. But Buddha saw it slightly differently, and he saw it in a way that, intentional actions will bring you karma, or intentional actions will bring you consequences, is actually probably a better way, an easier way to look at that. So if you were walking across a field and your intention was to go from A to B, that's your intention. But as you're walking across the field, unbeknownst to you, as you're putting your foot down, you may be killing little insects. Of course, if you could see the insects, and your intention would be to go around them, but we don't see them. So we can't be held responsible for unintentional actions, because sometimes we set out with the best intentions for us, and we know exactly, yes, this is exactly what I want to do and everybody will be happy with it. But of course we're all different, and some people may not be happy with that, but that was not your intention. So keep that in mind throughout this part 8, that I'm talking about intentional actions. So intentional actions, wise and skillful actions of the body. So first of all, we really have to ensure that we're not causing any type of violence towards other people. So by violence, I don't just mean that, you're punching them or, physically, harming them in that way. I mean, there can be many different ways of causing violence to people. So we have to ensure that our actions are not harmful. So we're not doing things, physical things, or even, you know, sexual things that are going to harm other people. We have to ensure that whatever actions we're doing with our body are skillful and wise. And as we go through this coronavirus, and in India here, we're having our second wave, and it is a lot worse than the first wave that came in. So, you know, actions, wise and skillful actions means social distance, means wear a mask, wash your hands, think about other people, think about, you know, am I going to infect them, or will they infect me? So this is a great way of understanding correct and wise actions, because if you're not wearing a mask, and if you think, oh, I like freedom and I don't want to be told what to do, you know, that is a selfish way of looking at things. If we can protect ourselves and protect other people by just wearing a mask, why wouldn't you wear a mask? I mean, if you don't wear a mask, then for me, I think that is unskillful and it's unwise, and it goes against what we're trying to teach here. So when your actions are wise and skillful, you can awaken your mind. Your mind will be at peace, your mind will be at ease, because you know you're not harming people. But if your actions are unskillful and unwise, then they're harming people, then of course that is going to affect your mind. That is going to stop your mind from awakening. So, you know, a good example of wise and skillful actions of the body is now to be wearing masks, social distancing and washing hands. You couldn't ask for a more up-to-date and wise and skillful action. So also, it's not just talking about being violent towards somebody, it's also taking what hasn't been given to us. So we seem to have it in our minds that little things are okay to take, and it's particularly if we're taking them from work, because it's okay, you know. If I work in an office and I take a pen, that's okay, that's not stealing. Or if I work in catering and I take half a loaf of bread, or I take some milk, that's not stealing. But if it hasn't been given to us, then it's stealing. So maybe stealing is quite a strong word, but another way we usually talk about this is about not being given. If it's not been given to you and you take it, then it is stealing. So when I spoke about this before, I had a wonderful message from a guy saying that he gets into work 15 or 20 minutes late each day, but puts down that he came on time. And he said to me, "Is that stealing?" And yeah, of course it is, because he's taking money for that 15 or 20 minutes and he wasn't there. So he's taking something that shouldn't be given to him because, you know, he's coming late. So he said he never really thought about it that way, but now that he's seen it that way and understands it now, he'll change his ways and he'll start to get in on time. So there's many different ways of stealing. It's not just being a thief. There's all those things of taking that sheets of paper and pens and all different things. You know, maybe you work in a factory, you're taking some nuts and bolts, or, you know, all these things are stealing. And if you are taking things that haven't been given to you, then of course that isn't wise, and that isn't a skillful way to act. And your mind will not be opening up if you're doing things like that. So we need to be aware of all of our actions and ensuring that our actions are kind, are skillful, are wise. We don't cause any harm through being violent with our bodies or stealing with our bodies. So Gandhi talked about ahimsa. And actually, so ahimsa means non-violence, yeah. But it actually means a little bit more than non-violence. So many people just think it means, yeah, oh, you're not a violent person, but actually it goes deeper than that. Ahimsa means that we don't even have the thought of violence. It doesn't come into our head. So if somebody did something violent to us, it wouldn't come into my mind to think, oh yes, I need to be violent back. You know, oh, they tried to hit me, now I need to hit them. With ahimsa, it means that we don't even have that thought of violence. If you can get your mind to that point where, you know, and violence here, I'm going to be talking about communication in a moment, about speech, but violence here also means that, you know, you can be violent with your words. So ahimsa means not to even have the thought of using your body as a weapon, using your words as a weapon, or even thinking about violence. So ahimsa is a great thing if we understand it properly, and if we use that word wisely, that if we can get ourselves to a point where we don't even have those destructive, negative thoughts. It takes time, of course it does, but I mean, all these things take time. It's taken you all of your life to get to where you are now. So you can't expect tomorrow you'll wake up and you've changed overnight. It takes effort and it takes time, but all these things that we use to awaken our mind are all completely doable. They're all there for us to be able to implement them if we put in that effort. So communication, wise and skillful communication, and boy do we need that. I mean, you've only got to look at Twitter and somebody just puts up their opinion. It's just something that they thought that, oh, this is how it should be, or this is how it is. And then look underneath at all the people that have to have an opinion about these things, and then they're so cruel and abusive with their language. And I just find that incredible that we've come to a point where we have to have an opinion about everything. I can remember a time when it was okay to say, actually, I don't know anything about that. I'll have to look it up. I mean, this was before Google, and it was a lot harder to look things up in them days. But people didn't have, or didn't seem to have an opinion, or certainly didn't give an opinion, you know, all the time about everything. And I think part of that is because it was face to face, and it's not so easy. Now it's so anonymous and easy to do, and you read something, your emotions come up, and before you think more rationally and wisely and skillfully, you write something down and send it. And of course, once it's sent, it's sent. Now later on you can delete it, but you know, so many people have already read that. So we need to ensure that whatever communication we're doing, it has to be wise communication. It has to be thought out. You know, it only takes 1/6 of a second for us to think, what am I going to say? So just think about that, 1/6 of a second, not even a whole second. So it's not that we have to sit around for a few minutes and think, what is a wise thing to say? You know, we can catch our thoughts. We can catch what we're going to say and make sure that what we're going to say is wise. Not only wise, it's helpful, it's supportive, compassionate, empathic. If we talk in this way, and if we talk in a way that we want to help somebody, and not talk in a way that, you know, it just helps me, or somebody spoke badly to me, so now I've got to vent it off and, you know, upset you because somebody upset me. You know, this is not a good way for us to act. Of course, all of our actions, whether it's body, speech or mind, behind all those actions, there's a need. There's a need for us. We want something. Even if we're not sure of what that is, there is always a need behind any of our actions, and we need to ensure that that need is not a selfish need, and is not a need that is going to harm other people. So when we're about to speak, we need to make sure that what we're going to say is supportive and helpful, because if it isn't, leave it. So Buddha spoke to his son Rahula and told him exactly this, and told him to think that before you do any action, look at it and think, is this going to harm somebody? Because if it is, don't do it. And if you look at that action and it isn't going to harm anybody, then go ahead and do it. It's quite simple when you look at it in those terms, but actually, of course, it's not so simple when, you know, we have mixed emotions and thoughts and ego and jealousy and pride and all of those things that come up in us. Of course, it makes it slightly more difficult. But if we try to keep all these things in the front of our minds, that whatever we're going to do, we need to make sure that it's going to be helpful and kind to people. If you start off and catch yourself and think, you know, oh, maybe my actions were not so skillful today, and the best time to be doing that is in that daily review session. So if you remember back to the beginning of this series, I spoke about at the end of the day doing a reflection practice and reflecting back over the day. What worked for us, reflect on that so we can reinforce it. What didn't work for us, reflect on that and see, why didn't it work out, and how can I look to do it better or do it differently so there's a different outcome. So the best time to be looking at your actions here is at a daily review session. Such a simple thing to do, but a thing that will totally change your life. If you just sit quietly, you don't even have to do this in meditation if you don't want to. You just sit quietly in a chair, lightly close your eyes so you can go inward, and then look at the key things that worked and didn't work for you. You know, simple thing, looking back, learning from our experiences. So this is where we should be looking at our actions in that daily review session, because then we can look, was this action helpful and skillful? And even if it was intentional, I intentionally did it, but it turned out wrong, then look at that. Was my intention a little faulty here then? Was I just thinking selfishly? So I think I've told this story before, but I was doing some mindfulness sessions at a school here in Chandigarh, and they gave me bags of clothes which the students had left behind in the locker rooms, and they were very good clothes. So I thought, well, nearby where we live, there's people who live in like a shanty town, like a slum area. So I thought I would go and give these clothes to the people there. So my intention was that I wanted to help these people. When I got there and went to give the clothes out, the ladies were very angry with me because they saw it as an insult that I was saying to them that they couldn't look after their kids and provide for their kids. They needed me to come along and give. So look, my intention was good, it was. I set out to try to help these people, but it turned out to be not so good. So, you know, when we are setting our intention, when we are doing intentional actions, we can't just think about ourselves. We can't just think about me. We have to think about, okay, this would turn out seems quite good for me, but what about other people? Will it be good for them? That, if we're looking in that way, that is extremely wise way to act, an extremely skillful way for us to act. So when we're communicating, we again have to make sure that we're not telling lies to people. Now this is a massively grey area here, isn't it, really? You know, I said at first I didn't like right and correct because, you know, there should be an incorrect and a wrong. You see, in between the two extremes of right and wrong, there's a massive grey area, and mostly we live our lives in this grey area. So I'm not telling you it's wrong to tell lies and we should never tell lies, because there are occasions where maybe it is the most skillful and the most kind and wise thing to do. Again, another story that I told, that one of the monks was dying of cancer. He was a young 17-year-old boy, and he was just slowly wasting away over a period of 2 months. And he asked me once about that, am I going to die? Now, he was in such pain, and I just couldn't bring myself to say yes. I couldn't, because I thought, it wasn't thinking about myself that I didn't want to say yes. I was thinking about him. He's already suffering. Do I need to add to that suffering? You know, in a week or so, he's going to drift off anyway. So I said, no, you'll be fine. Just relax. It will pass. So, of course, this is, you know, not just a little white lie. This is an extremely big lie. But for me, it was the wise and skillful thing to do, because I did not want to put that young boy under any more pressure. But it's a lie. So I'm not saying to you that, you know, lies are completely wrong. There has to be times when, you know, maybe the wise and compassionate and kind thing to do is not to tell the truth. But if you are telling a lie, if you are not going to tell the truth, ensure that it's because you don't want to harm the other person, and not because you don't want to get yourself into trouble. So it shouldn't be a selfish lie. It should be a lie to help somebody else. Then that is a wise way to be. So, you know, through all of these things, you know, we need to be looking at our actions not selfishly, but through the eyes of other people. So we have to ensure as much as we can that we don't lie. We must ensure that when we do talk to people, we don't use bad language, harsh words. Recently, somebody close to me has been playing different songs when we've been driving around, and you know, the language in some of these songs these days is just like, why? Why do we need that language? Why do we need to be doing those things? And, you know, talking in that way. Is it helpful? Is it skillful and wise? I don't think so. So, you know, when we use words, we have to ensure that, you know, what we're doing, we're using language, we're communicating in a way that is going to bring people together and not just tear people apart. So we have to ensure that our communication is wise and skillful. Now, so that's body and speech. And remember, we'll look back at in your daily review sessions and see, have you managed to do this? If you haven't, don't beat yourself up. You know, the daily review session isn't a session where we beat ourselves up. I mean, it's not about that. That's of no benefit. It's not even a session where we're playing blame game. It's your fault or it's my fault. We're not doing that. There's nothing to be gained from that. What we're trying to do is just look and change. And if we can change and be more wise and skillful and kind, then our mind is going to awaken. So no blaming there. So now mind. So we've done body and speech and now mind. And you might think actions of mind. What is an action of mind? Well, a thought is an action of mind. And it is extremely important that we try to catch these thoughts, particularly the thoughts that are not wise and are not skillful and they're not helpful. So before we do any action, we think. There is always a thought and then an action. So what you think, you become. So be careful, because all the negative things, it doesn't matter that other people cannot see what's going on up there. You know what is going on up there, and it's you that is going to get disturbed, and it's your mind that is not going to awaken. It's going to close down. So we need to be thinking about and checking our thought process. Even if we don't know that there is a thought before an action, there will be. Even if we're doing habit, even if we're doing, we're on autopilot, we're not even consciously thinking. Unconsciously, there will be a thought. So that's why it's so important to try to catch our thoughts, to try to ensure that our thoughts are wise. And if we don't have these negative thoughts, and how are we going to learn to grow? I dislike this positive psychology and law of attraction things where everything has to be positive and don't say negative and don't think negative, always think positive. You're masking over life. Life is positive and negative. That is life. We need to walk the middle path of those two extremes there. We don't need to pretend that we're not having a negative and say, oh, yes, it's not negative. I don't think that's helping. If you don't learn to fall down, you're never going to learn to get back up. So, I'm not saying stop these negative thoughts, but catch them. And then, how do I deal with those negative thoughts? Now, when our mind is going at 100 miles an hour and we're having 60,000 thoughts every day, it's really difficult to be catching those thoughts. This is where meditation and mindfulness calm us down, slow down those brain waves. We need to bring those brain waves down. I was reading a report the other day that said most of our days, most of our life now, our mind is spent in the threat mode. We can't carry on like that. I mean, look around you at all the people that are suffering from anxiety disorders now and depression, and how the suicide rate has gone up. All of these things are because our mind is under so much pressure. It's your mind. When your mind is under pressure, there is no way in the world it will awaken. No way. The only time it can awaken is when it's calm, when it's peaceful, when you've given it time to rest. That's where meditation comes in. You can start to catch your thoughts when you keep gently throughout the day, just keep bringing yourself back to the present moment all the time. So I've spoken about meditation earlier on in this session, and I've spoken a lot about mindfulness. So this is where those two practices really come into their own. When we start to look at actions of the mind, try to catch those thoughts, try to see, is this going to help somebody? Great, do it. Is it going to harm somebody? Don't do it. So we have to be aware of our actions of body, speech and mind, and ensure that those actions are wise and they're skillful. And if we are going to deviate in some way, make sure that it's not a selfish thing about us, it's about other people. So thank you so much for joining me in this session. Now, I know that all over the world COVID is starting to take off, so please, please, please be wise and skillful and wear your masks, wash your hands and do the social distancing and think. We all need to take responsibility. I see in many countries in the world, we're all looking to government. What is the government doing? What is the government doing? I would say, what are you doing? Individually, what are you doing? We can't keep looking at the government. This is going to be here for a long, long time. We thought 2021 was going to be better. It's not. And who knows what 2022 will bring. This is where skillful and kind, compassionate and wise actions really come into their own right at this moment. Take responsibility. Don't just let the government tell you what you need to be doing. Think for yourself and make sure that you cover your face and you keep social distance and you wash your hands. Not just for yourself, but for everybody. Remember, we're all interconnected. So thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to seeing you in the next session. So have a great week ahead and stay safe. Namaste.